If you're not willing to make those difficult decisions, you're going to lose money way more often than you're going to make money. And I think you have to have structure around that, because otherwise you won't make the decision, right? You won't make the hard decision if there's not gates, if there's not structure, if there's not a real, like, hey, here's the target, here's the milestone or the hurdle that we're trying to get through.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Our guest today was the former head of Nike Plus Lab and the Nike Accelerator program, who oversaw business development and partnerships. He's now the co-founder and CEO of FitLab, one of the first hybrid fitness brands built on a software platform that integrates boutique fitness studios, at-home digital fitness, events, nutrition, and retail fashion and equipment. His brands within FitLab include McGregor Fast by Conor McGregor, XPT by the surf legend Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese, Spartan Fit, Electric, Ragnar, and FitPlan. In this week's episode, we cover several topics, including the revolution of the fitness industry and why many traditional fitness brands will not make it, what it takes to be successful in the hybrid fitness space, and who will be some of the leading fitness brands of the future. So for an insight into what's next for the fitness industry, please enjoy this episode with the co-founder of FitLab, Mr. Brian Kirkbride.
Well, Brian, thanks for inviting us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're literally a stone's throw through from the beach. It's a wonderful office in Newport Beach. And just talking about our children and how lucky we are to live somewhere like this.
100%. That's great.
So I thought it would be a good place to start. I know you've done a number of things and you've had a great academic career. When I was researching you, I was pretty impressed with who I was going to be talking to. But you did an interesting period at Nike, and I thought that maybe an interesting place to start, because there's definitely some similarities to what the business that you're in now and what was happening there. And I was interesting as a starting point to find out, they're one of the, I guess, biggest sports brands in the world, and you were heading up a kind of an innovation team and department. What was it that Nike you felt sort of did really well, and why have they had the success that they've had in that particular field, would you say?
Yeah. So it's I mean, obviously it's an incredible brand, and I think the short version of that answer is probably that. A lot of us in consumer industries use words like authentic and community and inspiration and motivation and all the fancy things that we like to say that we do. That's Nike for good and bad, right? And there's been some stuff that's come to light in recent years about kind of some of the cultural stuff there over time. But that is a brand that is relentless in a focus about thinking with certainty why something is awesome for an athlete. They think of their consumers as athletes and why something is awesome for an athlete. Right. And numbers are numbers, data is data. If you can't tell me with clarity why someone is going to love this, be passionate about it, none of it matters. And for the rest of it, it's we hire people who we think are the consumer, we hire people who we think are the trendsetters, who are amazing storytellers, who are amazing designers, and we're going to tell them why it's awesome, and they're going to believe us. And I think that is the power of living authentically and hiring authentically and really thinking through why these things are so amazing for a consumer. And that was really the biggest lesson for me. So to kind of step back from that was really the biggest lesson for me. So I came out of school and it was investment banking and venture capital and a bunch of stuff that's like super data driven and very kind of academic and theoretical in a lot of ways, as you're thinking through like what are dynamics in an industry that are going to change over time, and how do demographic shifts impact the future of an industry and all of that sort of stuff, which is super interesting. And I walked into my first meeting with Mark Parker, who was the CEO of Nike at the time, and he was kind of stepping through, slides on the business, and there weren't words, and so he'll be talking about supply chain, which you would think super data intensive, super numbers driven, here's how we think about it. And it's like a dude breaking a tape on the slide, and that's it. There's no words. And so that for me was not that moment necessarily per se, but just everything always, why is it awesome for a consumer? Right? And how do you tell a story about it? And that was why I went there. So I was at the time doing growth stage investing, and this would have been kind of 2010-ish. And so it's right around the time of this first generation of like wearables, but they're big, clunky, ridiculous things, and the first generation of online fitness communities or weight loss communities or, you know, disease management communities. And as a financial investor at the time, super interesting, but nothing that you could understand why people would pay good money for, right? And I have always thought through, and it's a big thing that we do at FitLab, is think through an athlete pyramid where you go, hey, at the top here we have robots, right? They'll do whatever you tell them and they'll hit it. As you work your way down that athlete pyramid into these different niches, your consumer changes really meaningfully. And for most of us, that gets into all of those words that we started with, which is inspiration, and it is motivation, and it is community, and it is social support, and it is feedback and accountability, because we don't have a race, really, on Saturday to perform. It's not our profession to go out and perform every day. And when I looked around in 2010 about who's good at that stuff, Nike's as good as anyone, still is, but at the time certainly was as good as anyone on the planet. And they were actually just introducing, or had introduced that Nike Plus puck. Yeah. Which, if you remember it, you put
it in your shoes.
Had to take out your insole, put this little puck in, pair it to, and I think it wasn't even an iPhone at the time, right? It was like an iPod.
Yes.
And then, God willing, it told you your pace within like 10%, right? But they were putting a lot of weight behind it, and you could see that it was important to them, and you could see how genuine their desire to help people get better was, whatever that was. And so, long story short, I went up more thinking, hey, I'm going to pitch them on building. Can I build stuff around what you're doing, and got caught up with all the incredible work that they were doing, and that focus for me. I was there for probably 5 years. Was incredible. Let me do a bunch of stuff, kind of business development, digital innovation, all of that sort of stuff that I don't think they necessarily fully understood at the time, because they had spent 35, 40 years just pounding people into the dirt, right, from a competitive standpoint. And now it's hey, how do we think about playing in an ecosystem with other people? But I think we did some really good stuff with that digital portfolio and building out some really incredible partnerships and helping a lot of people join through digital fitness, really kind of some of the foundation of the digital fitness industry at the time, in the form of Nike Plus and Nike Run Club and Nike Training Club, and even getting into commerce with sneakers that I'm super proud of. And again, I left there with a very different perspective on what it would take to build a successful consumer fitness brand than I had going in.
Would you? Because I suppose a lot of people now in the traditional fitness space are looking to figure out how to do that, and there's certainly some real winners and losers. What would you say was Nike's approach? Because I think when they came into it, they must have been really on the cutting edge. And I remember having one of the little what was it called? The little...
The puck was just Nike Plus.
Nike Plus, yeah. I remember having it, and I kind of tried it, and it was okay when it first came out, but it wasn't really... It was very ahead of its time, and they seem to have continued to work on it. So how do they approach that innovation where it's a departure away from what they were making, which was sneakers, and then going into this technology and deciding, well, should we play in this space or not? Because when you look at someone like Under Armour that also went head first in it, they seem to have kind of come out of that and felt that probably that wasn't their core business.
Yeah, I think there's a few, there's these things, maxims at Nike, or there were. And one of them is we are on the offense always. And I think it's a thing that, again, I think a lot of us say, or a lot of companies will say, but I think there is, I guess the first part of that would be, one, genuine desire to help athletes get better, whatever that means for you as an athlete. Certainly a massive history of, particularly in running and innovation in running. And so the cool thing, you can actually go back like 10, 15 years and see these super clunky versions that like they would prototype out with people like literally running and they're bouncing on their waistband. But that is like, they've always thought of it as, this is who we are, right? We monetize through footwear and apparel, but our job is to help inspire and motivate and help all athletes to improve. And so the service side of that is a natural extension of that, but gets into a bunch of complications. Certainly anytime you're getting into hardware and software and all of those things, it gets into a bunch of complications. But I think the drive at Nike is genuinely to innovate. It is to help people get better. It is to be ahead of things and not, and to aggressively take market share and lead and not kind of be in a position where you're going to potentially lose to someone who's being more innovative than you. And so that takes you into things that are going to be a little uncomfortable for you. And so it's how do we make sure we bring in the right people to be successful in that space? How do we make hard decisions if things are working, aren't working? FuelBand's a great example of an extension actually beyond the Nike Plus puck, where they wanted to have a unit of measurement that helped all athletes be able to speak and compare to each other. And so there's this concept of a measurement called Fuel, and then a device that was really one of the first wearables, again, in a space that actually became a pretty compelling business, certainly bigger than a lot of the individual companies in the space. And there was a decision to shut it down because it did lead you into things that were too far at the time of field, or from the core business. It took you into hardware. It took you into a very different customer service model. It took you into all of those things. But had they not done it and learned that lesson, that's when you leave yourself open to, I would argue, some of the things that some of their competitors had in the space, where they might have made an acquisition that they didn't fully understand what the implications were, how to integrate it, because you didn't have anything like that in your org, and so you didn't really understand what the implications of integrating it is, or managing a workforce that looks different. Nike's kind of never been afraid to make the investment and do the work to really have a different level of understanding. And I think that led them to taking leadership positions in that space. And it's not without pain, it's not without lessons, but I think all of us in business, or even on our personal side, right? Like, that unfortunately is the way that you internalize, and it is the way that you learn. And if you're not willing to make those investments and go through the growing pains and kind of internalize the lessons, that's where you get, either in a place where you're stagnating and you're not growing, or in a place where you're kind of left trying to make these big bets that have much more binary outcomes.
Do you think some of it's down to kind of also knowing when to say no or pull the plug? And I guess if you look at a lot of fitness businesses, I guess that are trying to make that transition into becoming, I suppose, where you guys are going, and we'll come on to that in a moment. Do you think there's some sort of, like you say, with Nike, when they realized it was a different customer service model and a few other things, do you think it's easy to, or is there a way then to be able to say, well, look, this is a great idea, we've experimented, we've put some money into it, but this is definitely a different business model and we need to kind of rethink things? Or is that an organic thing that you just have to kind of figure out as you go along?
I think so first of all, it's imperative, right? Like, you can only do these things if you're willing to make hard decisions. Otherwise, you're wasting resources, because we all know the data on what percentage of things work, right? Which is not a lot. It doesn't matter who you are, how good you are. There's magic in creating things, particularly from a consumer standpoint, and particularly from a fitness standpoint, where you're asking so much from a consumer, right? It's not like hang out and have a beer and some pizza and watch Netflix. It's like get up and suffer with us for a while. So there's magic in how that hangs together, and if you're not willing to make those difficult decisions, you're going to lose money way more often than you're going to make money. And I think you have to have structure around that, because otherwise you won't make the decision, right? You won't make the hard decision if there's not gates, if there's not structure, if there's not a real, like, hey, here's the target, here's the milestone or the hurdle that we're trying to get through, and if we don't clear the hurdle, got to make a decision. Now, maybe there's new information that we've learned in there, and so we're going to tweak it and try something else, but you can't just kind of go along and hope things get better, right? That's just not the way that things work.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
I read that you said in a couple of articles that you saw a failure in the fitness industry to put members first. Do you think some of that, it comes down to what we're talking about with the product? It's in terms of them sort of not really focusing the energy on that, as you say, they're putting the member first and then building the infrastructure around that. And if you go back to what you said about Nike, it was to do with how can we make people, was it better or faster or something like that. So it sounded as though they had a kind of really clear goal of what they were about, and then they built this business around it. Do you think the fitness industry may not really know what business or what their goal is, and that's why they sort of failed to build systems around it, which is what you're saying, to putting the member first, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Well, so one, I think it's the nature of business, right? Like that's why we'll have quotes about you got to burn bridges, you got to burn the boats, right? Like the fitness industry grew up just in a fundamentally different business model, right? If we go to kind of big boxes, jamming contracts down people's throats, making it hard to quit, oversell the box, hope to God they don't all show up, right? Or even if we look at, we can look at other kind of media-based fitness businesses that didn't transition to streaming for a really long time because it's a lot easier to inspire you to purchase that box of DVDs. I don't care if you open it or not. It is what it is. Those transitions are hard. And so I think Nike, fortunate in the sense that the vision was so large, right? When you're saying like our job is to inspire and motivate every athlete on the planet, and asterisk, if you have a body, you're an athlete, like that gives you a lot of license to play, right? That's not like, hey, our job is to have a 30%, box contribution rate. We want to open as many boxes as we can. So one, big vision. Two, really strong leadership. Mark had set a goal that he wanted to double the revenue of the business in like 4 or 5 years, which is staggering to think that a company of Nike's scale and size and maturity would set out an audacious goal like that makes your team go, holy crap, like how would we possibly do that? And so I think a bit of, not all of those, I guess I shouldn't say luck, like all of those are really strong business principles that came from an incredible founding team, an incredible management team. I think when you're in a business that's having success in a business model, transitioning to a different thing is really scary, particularly if you're a public company or you're a later stage private company, or you have, investors that you're working with. That stuff is super hard. And so I don't say it to trivialize how hard it is or the complexity or how scary it is or how much risk there is. But I do think that the industry for a long time has been, or was, to some degree still is, forcing its business model on consumers, as opposed to going, what do I think that you need to be most successful, right? Now, even at Nike, we had to talk to 400 million people at a time for it to feel like it was meaningful enough to move the business, right? And that, when you think about doing the implications of that from a service side, in terms of I want to help you get better at an athlete, that's really hard, right? The odds that 400 million people need the same thing, it's tough, right? And so I think there's just a reality of business where, changing ahead of need is really, really hard. And so for us, my partner, Mike Melby, was, at a group that was New Evolution Ventures that had 3,000 plus doors, fitness doors across the planet, some great brands like UFC, Gym, and bought Crunch and turned it around, all of that sort of stuff, and kind of different version of the same thing, right? Certainly super successful at what they were doing. But at the time we came together, we were looking at a demographic environment where Millennial and Gen Z consumers were probably 60-65% of the relevant kind of consumer market opportunity. And if you apply that to, big, empty, big box, jamming a contract down somebody's throat, very little digital component, not brands that stand for something and are taking a clear, have a clear consumer voice. Like, that's just not a fit, right? Like, that's just not what any of us would say about that to stereotype that base, what they want and need. And frankly, what we were already seeing when you were seeing boutiques grow at 30, 35% a year, when you're seeing digital fitness grow at 40+% a year. And this is, 7 years ago. So I think it's easy for, Mike and I came together and just said, hey, there's just this huge opportunity here where you have just entrenched incumbents who are great at the thing that they were doing, but not really interested in or frankly capable of adapting to what we think this consumer really needs, right? And so,
do you think that's the case? Like, most of them are going to really struggle to kind of make that shift?
I think it's going to be really painful. Yeah, and I think we've seen it, right? Again, so there was a reason boutiques were growing at the rate they were growing. There was a reason digital pre-COVID was growing at the rate it was growing, and we know, we can talk about some of the pain that some of those at-home fitness players may be in from a stock price standpoint, but I don't think any of us would argue that at-home fitness wasn't accelerated over the last 2 years from an adoption and willingness to pay standpoint. But yeah, I think it's non-trivial. I think it's super easy to go, oh, cool, we have an app, we have an app now, so we're a hybrid fitness company. Like, that's not a thing. When you look at, again, if you go back to what we're asking people to do, we're asking you to carve out a bunch of time from your day. Work, kids, family, whatever else you may have. We're asking you to put the beer and the pizza away, step away from the TV, the phone, the whatever, and get up and suffer with us for 45 minutes, plus get there, plus shower, plus do, right? Like, that's a massive choice for people. And the reality is, I think as fitness operators, we have to understand that we're competing for your time, period. And you have amazing things to do with that. And we have the little angel on your shoulder who's going like, hey, Brian, you should do this. But again, most of us don't really need, we don't have a thing that's causing us to need to work out. So it's a big choice. And I think for all of us, we have to view our job as how do we shrink the significance of that choice? We believe you can do that through providing really powerful brands. So I'm sure we'll talk about that later on, about kind of how we think through partners that we want to partner with to drive authenticity and kind of passion and conviction for people. We can do that through availability, which is if you find a thing that you love to do, you should be able to do it whenever, wherever, however you want to. So for us, that is absolutely at home. That should also be linked to a studio opportunity, because sometimes we just want a coach or we want other people sweating beside us and we want kind of a more controlled environment. And we like to integrate events because they do provide that purpose, right? You don't have to just wake up and decide I should probably do a spin class today. It's, hey, I signed up with my buddies to do that thing 3 months from now, and if I don't get to the gym, I'm not gonna be able to do it. And so we wanted to really unify how you can participate in fitness, both through kind of really targeted brands that really stand for something and speak to you at where you may be in your point in your life and what you want to do and who you want to do it with, but also just remove that choice. Like, I have to go figure out what app to do at home, and then I got to go figure out a gym that I like or a studio that I like, and then I got to figure out why should I be doing this anyway? And again, if you're an operator in any one of those silos, sure, you can acquire something, or sure, you can have somebody build you an app, but that's not what you do. And check the box, if you go back to one of our underlying premises, which is it's about shrinking that gap and removing friction and making sure that what we're asking of you or offering to you is awesome. A check the box solution just doesn't work. Right. It's not about just having an app. It's not about a technology company opening up a studio. It's about providing one integrated experience that's actually where the pieces are aware of each other, connected to each other, and compelling and purposeful and built. And so we built our whole platform to accomplish that. And I think just, again, stapling stuff together or checking a box, it's just a different thing that I don't think for this consumer base. And that, by the way, that consumer has obviously only grown in importance over the last 7 years in terms of relevancy. And so our premise is check the box won't be good enough. And unless you're built to do this, it's going to be really hard. And I still think for the most part, a lot of people say hybrid fitness now. I still think for the most part, that's not what people are offering. And so we believe there's a huge opportunity to really be the first that does that in a real way.
So with FitLabs, then, when you started, how did you go about it? Did you think, okay, right, we need a location and we're going to build this around it? Did you think we need to be a software company and we need to get that? When you and Mike came up with these ideas, what was the sort of the roadmap and the key moves that you needed to put in place?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's a Tyson quote, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. But we had a really pretty plan. So the whole thing for us was like it has to be built purposefully together at the same time, right? So it was technology is our connective tissue, right? Like it has to be your skeleton to have all the pieces be informed, right? So if I want to have your at-home environment, your digital experience, understand that you went to a McGregor Fast studio yesterday and did a red zone workout that was, had a lot of hamstring exercises, and therefore at home tomorrow you should get recommended, a complementary green zone workout that doesn't have that. We need to be able to pull data from the studio that allows the at-home experience to understand that, right? And so that's why like if you don't build it on a foundation of technology, it's going to be really hard. The other thing we had to do, since we wanted to be able to offer multiple brands so that we could have these deep, really authentic, targeted brands, was to be able to build it on one shared code base so we don't have to build full tech stacks for every brand, right? Which would be super expensive and inefficient. And so we built one code base that allows us to build a feature once and express it out to as many brands as we want to, right? So we are certainly at heart a technology business. Now, I think we probably all agree that even saying technology business today is weird because we all better be technology businesses, but that is our foundation. And we brought over, the VP of engineering from Nike, who was in charge of Nike Plus, Nike Run Club, sneakers, all of Nike Training Club, all of that sort of stuff, to be our CTO. So Greg Sharp is our CTO. He ran all of that stuff at massive scale at Nike and brought over some of our lead creatives and product managers. That's our technology and digital product team. At the same time, if you don't have people who understand how to run a studio and work with franchisees, licensees, and support them in their growth and understand who's in those boxes and what your capabilities are, you're going to have a bunch of technology people building out really freaking sophisticated things that no one in a studio knows how to do anything with, right? So the long answer to a simple question, I think our whole premise was, this is what we're trying to do, and so we have to have people that have run each of those functions at scale really, really well from the start, to have the input to where they're built to work together, and then be the infrastructure in place to be able to unite them. And so we really always said, so our founding premise was, hey, we're going to lead with studios, but have them already, pre-built into a digital experience that complements them. We had about 1,000 studio development pipeline in March of 2020. And that's where the Tyson quote comes in, which is obviously COVID hits and we built 0 of them. And kind of back, now in a position where at the time, brutal, worst thing ever. And now I would tell you, like a lot of, I think, folks who took the punch and rolled with it, best thing that could have happened. I think our studios would have been good if we had done them at the time. I think, we had the benefit of just being new and not having baggage and being able to learn from all these other amazing concepts in the industry. So I think they would have been good and kind of a next wave. But we've all now had to think through what happens when it happens again. How does it actually feel different from the minute a consumer walks in? How does it not just feel like another box, right? Mm-hmm. How does it feel like a connected experience? How does it feel like truly an evolution? If something like this happens again, how do you help consumers feel? How do you help members feel safe And that gets into more than just HVAC and that sort of stuff. It gets into layout, it gets into structure, it gets into the integration of technology to let you feel like, okay, well, I could always have access to it at home, even if I didn't want to come into the studio. So it just forced us to really, really dig in at a granular level to every aspect of the consumer experience. And I just don't think I can honestly say we would have gone to that level of detail. Again, I think we would have been proud of what we put out, but I just think without that, you just wouldn't have. And so we've done that. And so now we're back to, and I'd say the other impact of COVID for us was it kind of reordered that phasing, where we were able to go out and acquire a business called Ragnar, which is a mass participation events business that actually gave us an events foundation, not just under the Ragnar brand, but they'll run, events under McGregor Fast and under XPT and under kind of all of those brands for us, so that every consumer in our portfolio has the ability to think of themselves like an athlete for a period of time and to set a goal and to go out and do something epic that teaches them a little bit about who they are. And even if you're not one of the studio members who's maybe doing that or one of the at-home members that's doing that, you feel it, right? You feel it in the programming that's aiming you at it, and you feel it in the other people in the community who are participating in it. And I think even just being part of that feels different. It lets you think of yourself differently. It gives purpose to the session. It gives purpose to your sleep. It gives purpose to your nutrition in a way that I think can be massively beneficial. Did you put
that out instead of the stores then? Did you put some apps out?
So what we were able to, so what we did during COVID was, you have to react, right? So we went through the thought process on studios, obviously decided not to build any out during COVID, which, and again, I'd have to say super fortunate to not have had 50 open, right? It gave us the ability to really not have that anchor to try to figure out. But yeah, we reordered the steps, kind of same North Star, reordered some of the steps in how we think we want to get there, started to really put some of the digital, the at-home concepts out, think about what's next on the at-home front as well, and kind of how we think we can be meaningfully different from some of the other folks who are out there. And I think there's some great stuff out there. And started to pull in some of the other elements. So we think about this flywheel from a fitness standpoint for consumers, a fitness lifestyle standpoint. The first three we've talked about already: studios, at-home, events. All of those should be linked. And then those are really, and that's 100 million plus of addressable market, right? Globally, it's great market. But it's also the gatekeeper to all the other stuff, right? So you have 75%, so another 300 plus billion dollars of spend in apparel, equipment, and supplements, right? And if we're able to help you be active across those three dimensions on the front end, we're also going to be the best person to help you understand what equipment you need to be successful in that program. We're going to have coaches in front of you, either in your studio and or on your TV at home, wearing whatever we think it is you should be wearing. And we're going to know the work that you're doing. And so we're in a really good position, just like a personal trainer would be, to say, hey, here's some of the nutrition needs that you should be thinking about. And so we want to do that in a way that obviously is beneficial and not just us jamming down, hey, buy this, buy this, buy this. But I think for most consumers, and certainly just speaking for me, if I find something I want to do, I want to be able to do it whenever, wherever, however, and I need you to tell me what I need to be successful in it. And I want to maximize the results of the work that I'm putting in. And so that's really the goal for us. And so pulled in Ragnar to hit that events. We acquired a business called The Electric, which is incredible sport eyewear and apparel and accessories, and started to kind of fill out that flywheel a little earlier than we would have in a normal environment, because as much as we feel like we got punched in the face, obviously for a mass participation events business during COVID, whatever's worse than getting punched in the face happened to you. So we were able to find incredible brands. There's a ton of people out there with Ragnar tattoos because the events are that meaningful to them and who they are in their life, and that's what it takes in fitness. So we were able to go find some incredible brands to help us flush out that whole flywheel that we wanted to be able to offer, press our digital forward much more aggressively than we would have normally. And now we're in a space, fortunately, where we have the out-of-home stuff coming back, and utilization rates in the industry look great, and our studios start to get built out here this year, and our events are kind of back up and crushing. And so kind of led us to a point where we're ultimately much farther along, both in terms of, I think, the net quality of all of those pieces, but additionally just being able to have more of those pieces of the flywheel than I think we would have. I think we would have gone out and just gotten studios and the at-home stuff going, because we would have had so much work to do just kind of meeting demand on that front, that it would have been hard to kind of fill out some of those other pieces. But this gave us the opportunity to do that.
With the integration, it sounds like an obvious thing, and I know I've worked with lots of companies that have tried to do that, where it makes sense to say, well, here's your training, here's your nutrition, here's your clothing, here's your equipment. But for years, very few have actually been able to pull that off, and they tend to be kind of really small because they've got the ability to sort of get their arms around the whole thing. Would you say that part of the secret in being able to make that work is the technology base that you referred to?
Yeah, I think so. I think of a bunch of things. I think that if we go kind of to the selfish end of it, so the business end of it, it's expensive to acquire consumers. So every business is thinking about, how do I adjust that? A lot of that for us is kind of these amazing partners that we have, like Connor or Laird and Gabby or others who have such an amazing and powerful connection with consumers. And then you think about lifetime value, right? And I think there's a difference in going, hey, for my model to work, I need you to buy my supplements and buy my apparel and buy my equipment, right, versus saying, hey, if you love this training style, I'm going to let you rep it or be a part of it however you want to. And then, but each piece works by itself, right? From an economic standpoint, each piece works by itself. It just gets better and better for us as a business the more pieces that you participate in. And then, like some other folks in the space, obviously we have multiple training modalities, multiple brands within that portfolio. So as your interests change over time, we have a chance to at least retain you longer than others. And then every new brand you get into also has that whole flywheel of events, studios, at home, supplement, apparel, equipment, right? But I think if the bet is, hey, I need all these pieces to work for it to work, then yeah, that's really hard. If the bet is, hey, if we can get 20% of people to convert into some of these other aspects and another 20% to convert to another brand over time, and that takes us from a viable, nice business, proposition when you look at LTV to CAC into an incredibly powerful business proposition, that I think is different. And again, if that is all done, to switch back to the consumer lens, if that is all done in a way that feels kind of like the way that you would think about Disney, right? Or Marvel, which I guess is Disney anyway. But, we have these incredible brands or franchises. And if you want to wear a shirt or buy a toy or read about it or watch a movie or watch a TV show or go to a theme park or whatever else they're going to, if that all is done in a way where it deepens your connection to the thing that you love and enjoy, then that is a really powerful kind of beneficial cycle. If that is done as so you're doing them as standalone. So like the electric is its own thing. Everything has to be its own thing. And then look, if obviously just like a media company would, hey, if you like this title, you're probably going to love this too. Like we have to show you all of the brands and give you the choice, right? And then you might want to engage with all of them. You might want to engage with one. You may change 18 months from now to want to engage with this other thing. And that's our job and really any company's job is to kind of help understand what you love and make sure that we're showing you more and more and more of things that you probably will also love if that's the thing that you loved. But yeah, I don't think by any means we're not suggesting that everyone who comes into FitLab is going to, buy some apparel and buy equipment and sign up for the gym and sign up for an at-home experience. But I think some are. And I think some will change over time. But when you find something you love, I think our thesis is in fitness, it's got to become a part of your life. And we want to make sure that we're not leaving it up to you to go figure out what you need to be successful at it. But your app and your studio and your nutrition, they've got to
their P&Ls
it's got to be
stand
it's
up.
got to be a service, right? So it's different if we're just if we just had a store in the app that said here's some equipment and here's some stuff, right? You'll sell some stuff. But it's going to be like a gym where, you know, you'll sell some supplements and you'll sell some T-shirts and you'll sell me socks when I forgot socks and I showed up at the gym. It's what you know, the future of all of this is for all of us is, hey, you did this workout. Here's what Connor would take after this workout. It's part of the program that you're a part of. You don't have to do it. It's up to you. But if you want to know how to maximize your results, then we all know that how you recover is every bit as important as the work that you just put in. How you fuel yourself is every bit important, if not more important than the work you put in. And so all of that has to come to you as a system, not, hey, go figure out your supplementation, go figure out your equipment, go figure out all that stuff. We don't have to do any of that. We know exactly what we're prescribing you to do. We know the equipment that you need to do it. We know what you should be taking afterwards. All of that should be a system for you where you can just say, tell me what I need, right? And so that is, for us, at scale, that's technology, right? At scale, that's digital integration that provides you a solution, not just gives you, it kind of goes back to like being purpose-built to do all of it versus stapling stuff on and making it available to people. Just a portfolio of disconnected stuff isn't super interesting to somebody. There's still all of the work I still have to do all of the work in that environment versus just like, sign me up for this. Yes, I'm interested in the nutrition, or no, I'm not. I'm going to figure that part out myself. Yes, I want the equipment, or no, I got it. But all of that should just be, here's the solution. Give me, you know, this, and this, and I'm done.
I guess that personalization is pretty unique because even in most retail experiences that I've seen, and outside of Amazon, because I know they probably do something similar, but if you're actually doing a program or a workout and then understanding what you're doing and when your day off is and when you had a hard workout and then what things fit into it, I think, you know, that's pretty smart, because I guess that's almost like a new way of e-commerce in some way, isn't it? You know, it's content with...
I think that's right. I mean, we also, you know, now we started with hybrid fitness. Now everyone wants to say omni-channel fitness, but I think that's right. Again, if you go to our premises, we're competing for your time. We have to give you purpose. We have to inspire you and motivate. And we have to remove all of those pieces of friction. And the reality is, that's not hard, right? Like when you look at like what's technology good at, what are algorithms good at, like if your business is built with that purpose in mind, that's not a technology problem, right? It's a super easy technology solution if that is what you were built to do. It becomes hard when you have all these disaggregated things and you don't have single sign-on, and so I don't actually know anything about you in these different environments. If you're one person within that environment, we understand a lot about you.
When you think about it as well, like I'm trying to compare it to sort of like Netflix, but there's no situation where you can kind of plug other things around a movie or whatever. But I suppose with events and a fitness experience, there are quite a lot of things that you can, from a sales perspective, you can package around that, can't you? You know, it's almost like a package holiday. You know, you can you have your drinks before and after, and you know, would you like this based on the mood, the kind of Mexican evening where you've got your tequilas and stuff like that. But I've never seen it done. It's how far away is that from a reality? You know, are we there? Is it a few years away from that being able to happen, where it is almost like personalizing that whole thing for you?
So, I mean, our studios start opening. We start building them. We're looking for spaces. Our partners are looking for spaces right now. So in terms of like when do studios come online, it's back half of this year when the out-of-home stuff starts to get built out. We know what those look like. Obviously, Mike and the NEV team, or his team, have done that as much as anybody over the last decade. But we need those pieces to come online for kind of that full flywheel to be there. But other than that, you know, again, it's you have at home, you have those other pieces, and the rest just leverages that omni-channel framework, right? Like the rest is just equipment, it's apparel, it's supplements. It's super important to have great solutions on that front, but you already have the distribution.
Right. Yeah, that's very clever. It's a new And you have you got a name for it then?
So unfortunately, it leads you into a bunch of buzzwords, right? So we have always said hybrid fitness, which is like knowingly wrong because hybrid would suggest two things when we're talking about more than two things. Yeah. So it's not really hybrid fitness. It leads you into omni-channel fitness, except you're now in words that everybody says and nobody means, right? In our version, it truly is to us omni-channel fitness, which is what we want to be able to do. But it's almost become one of those words that doesn't mean anything anymore because everybody's claiming it and not delivering it. Yeah. So we think of ourselves as a multi-brand fitness lifestyle business.
So how did you come up with the brands? And maybe you can talk a little bit about them, because I've tried to stay up to date with them, but there's probably some I've not got there. So what are the brands that you've got, and how do they all kind of fit together? Are they there for a particular style of training, or tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Electric, which is think of it more as like the merchandising side of ours, but incredible brand, action sport market predominantly, surf, skate, snow, but style that performs is the tagline, and that's really their license. But amazing brand. We talked a little bit about Ragnar, which is our mass participation events brand, has largely been team-based historically, and then we will launch it in studios and an at-home version. So it'll be our endurance brand from a training style standpoint. XPT, Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. Laird's iconic big wave surfer. Gabby was one of Nike's first female athletes. I think the first female athlete with a shoe. Ridiculous humans, like a next evolution of humans, but really their journey across performance. So obviously if you're going to go stand up on an 80-foot wave and that's something that you feel called to do for whatever reason, it's not that you're not nervous about it when you're up there, right? And so it was how to control physiological state, right? How do I control my nervous system so that I can perform at my absolute best when I'm doing it? How do I train my body to have a chance of surviving should things not go the way I want them to? And that led them through a ton of breath work, obviously a ton of training, a lot of underwater training, which is kind of natural for him, and a lot of what we think of as contrast therapy, which is ice and heat therapy. And so ton of hormonal benefits, ton of physiological state benefits, ton of recovery benefits across that training spectrum. We really think of it as our elite performance brand. So they work with a bunch of celebrities, pro athletes, special forces, tactical units, that sort of stuff. And we're democratizing that for the rest of us because that is holistic performance for us, right? Whether that's dealing with difficult situations at work, at home, looking good, moving well, living the way you want to it's an incredible concept. We will also be doing that. Those will be kind of concierge, almost executive training brands. And then we acquired a business called FitPlan, which is really a leader in trainer marketplaces. So you can train with your favorite coach, athlete, celebrity. It's folks like Jen Selter and Michelle Lewin, who are amazing fitness influencers. A-Rod is on there, Christian McCaffrey, Gronk, Michael Hearn, who's a multi-time Mr. Olympia. But it's whatever your training style, interest is, whoever you might like, there's going to be somebody who's an incredible leader in that field to help you train to that interest. Super interesting platform, incredible athlete relationships, and I think a space that is going to be super interesting in the future as we all kind of look for more personalized fitness instruction. And then we have a partnership with Spartan, which is an obstacle course racing business. We
had him on a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, super fun.
Yeah.
We partnered on a fitness offering. So
is that a club? Is that going to be?
Currently, it's digital. We are, the original intent was to have it be in studios as well, which I think would be super fun. You can imagine, flipping some tires and pushing some sleds and climbing some ropes instead of just doing working with some sandbags instead of just doing more traditional gym, stuff. So we'll see. I think that's a decision for us this year. Obviously, having them get out of getting back to being able to put on their events has been super important here as we come out of COVID. And so studios maybe are the next thing with that partnership. And that was the original intent. But I think we'll jointly make a decision there in the next few months on that front. And let me think. And then McGregor Fest, which we talked a fair amount about, but with Connor, obviously just an incredible partner, one of the greatest in his sport ever, and just amazing human, incredible promoter, and super interesting concept. So it's based on it's the fighter aerobic, anaerobic system of training, McGregor Fast. But it really is his developed, the program he and his coaches, who are former Tour de France riders, developed to help build his engine and train the way that an athlete really trains. So it's a sports science training, which really leads us to intent-based training, which really you can think of as kind of VO2 max, lactate and more endurance oriented, right? But kind of power, speed, endurance, train with your intent. So we have red, orange, and green zone based workouts that get to those intents, and then obviously integrates combat. So we're launching a connected striking experience that'll be in the studios as well as available at home.
I think I saw that one of the fights, because you're involved with Paradigm, aren't you? As their investor or something. I saw that.
So Paradigm is Connor's agency. Yep.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I saw the bags and stuff it was somewhere in LA.
For the Super Bowl, probably. Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. Super excited. That comes out end of summer. Really fun, connected experience that lets we can track number of strikes, power, speed, all of that sort of stuff. So it allows us to give you feedback, allows us to kind of compare you across the population and also with yourself and track progress and that sort of stuff. But super excited about it. How
do those brands translate internationally? So I know you're looking at going around the world. Do they, like Connor, do they have sort of equivalents in other markets which are not as strong as maybe Connor, that maybe is more strong in America and certain place in Europe, or are they, when you looked at it, did you sort of look at them as fairly global brands that could work anywhere?
We like global. We think of everything on a global basis. If you look at the market, it's kind of 50-50, right? So clearly ex-US is important, and we've tried to partner with folks who we think can resonate globally. Certainly Connor checks that box, but while maybe not the same size circle, Laird and Gabby are certainly iconic in their space and known globally, and I think that concept will translate. But yeah, in general we think very much on a global basis, and I think that is going to be critical for us going forward. So obviously, taking concepts to Europe is non-trivial, and you need to have partners there. Same thing, but that's not an uncommon structure, and particularly when you think of like the boutique studio industry in terms of doing large master territory deals, across the planet. And Mike and the team have a great history of successfully doing those.
Yeah. Are there? I know not everybody does it with, I guess, personalities, but are there risks? Like, say, Connor's. I know I follow Gabby and Laird, and they seem to be kind of fairly, very calm, peaceful people. And then Connor's like, you never know, he's in the ring, you never know where he's going to go next. Are there sort of considered dangers when you've got like a personality attached to hundreds of clubs and stuff?
Yeah, look, I think nothing's without risk, right? So you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons. I will say, look, I was at Nike when we had some stuff not go super well, right? But it's not always the people you think.
No.
So for us, we had Tiger, Lance, we had the Joe Paterno Child Care Center. Like, if there's something you think wasn't going to be a problem, or wasn't like, so So one, I think there's always risk in partnerships of any sort, let alone, around specific people. So you have to have a plan for it. I think you have to have a visual plan for it in terms of what happens if the partnership doesn't work, and how do you keep that brand alive, but maybe with just a different, not with the name involved, and can it stand on its own? Obviously, there's contractual stuff that you have to worry that you have to set up, but really, it's having a plan in place. I think Nike was great at that. And then you have to be willing to make the hard decision, right? Of what does that look like? I'll say, for the most part, barring certain things, getting into a little bit of trouble for folks like Connor
goes with the brand.
Tends to not. It actually kind of increases his profile, increases his followers, and isn't super problematic. Obviously, there's a bucket of stuff where that's just not okay to be involved in. Period. And so, I think we've had to be super thoughtful about that. I think my time at Nike was super helpful in just kind of seeing how they thought about it and prepared for it, and had to be ready to take decisive action. And when they chose to really stick through it and support and kind of get through it. And I think they did that really elegantly and really gracefully and really well in most cases. And I think those partnerships, when done right and when treated as partnerships, and these are like, Connor's an owner in the business, right? He's a partner. He's not an ambassador. He doesn't get paid a ton of money. He's building a huge business with us, and that's what he's incented on the big piece. And I think when you look at them that way, do your diligence, make sure you know who you're talking about, set up things where we're all on the same page. If certain things happen, that's not going to be okay. So we've tried to do all of that. You try to manage it as well as you can, and prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And I think we're super optimistic on who we have. We know who they are, and they're quality. They're more than quality humans.
How do you deal with the logistics of what you've got a nutrition? What's the nutrition brand that you do? You own a nutrition brand?
We are partnered with and have a small stake in a business called Momentous.
Okay, that's the one.
Which is just incredibly high quality, well formulated supplements. So built in with a lot of professional team nutritionists, and has the lion's share of the market on the pro and tier 1 college team. So as you know, with supplements, even some of the best known brands that you would think surely are high quality, and like when you look at what's in the stuff, like it's pretty gnarly. And so a lot of Momentous stuff is NSF certified, which is safe for sport, meaning athletes can take it and not worry about a contaminant making them ineligible and all that stuff. So there's a really high quality, but there's also just a lot of formulation stuff that you would think was handled in mainstream supplementation that isn't. So like if you look at collagen, which a lot of us take in the morning with coffee because it's easier to just mix it in. If you're taking it in a fasted state with no vitamin C, you're not absorbing.
Really?
And if and really to do it, you should be taking it within 30 to 60 minutes of your workout. And so there's just some really simple, once it's explained to you, you're like, well, how is this, like, that's really easy to solve. Why did I not know that? Why didn't somebody do it that way? But when you're working with sport team, like those guys care that their players are performing at their peak. And so it's the first thing you get to is like, well, I don't really care about this unless it's actually having the result that I care about. So incredible quality, great brand. We've supported it. They've supported us. They've done some private label for us in the past. At some point may make sense for us to have something that we own more fully. But then you get into a lot of the global stuff.
But that's what I was going to say next. Like, I know just even huge brands here, when it comes to different countries in Europe and everywhere, there's all these crazy laws there.
It is crazy. Yeah. So for us, it's that's a bucket that we've started out with partnerships because of that. We have another business in Germany called Freeletics. Like selling whey protein in Germany is like it's like not possible if you didn't source the material there, right? So like there's just all of these things that's a super interesting, great opportunity at the right stage for us. For now, we'll solve it through partnerships, because the complexity at real scale is really meaningful. At a global scale is really meaningful.
So coming on to the locations then, when you look at a facility now post-COVID, are you looking at the layout and I guess the in-club experience differently? And if so, what are some of those differences that, without giving away any sort of trade secrets, but what are some of those differences that you think are really important now that probably weren't?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, you have to. Look, I think a lot of us are looking. So certainly, you look at HVAC, you look at all of that sort of stuff. I think a lot of it with studios comes in as much to consumer perception as reality, right? If we're kind of honest about it. And so, I think there's a difference for people. As much as we know, hey, the really dangerous things in the future are like COVID, likely to be airborne. And so therefore, it may not really be about, am I touching the same equipment as the other 35 people in the class? But we also know that from a feeling standpoint, it feels better if you're only sharing with one or two other people, right? And not running across the room with 40 other people and touching all the same stuff and getting their sweat all over you and all that sort of stuff. So I think we've thought a lot about quadrants versus, just big open space, stepping through 27 different exercises on the same pieces of equipment as 27 other people versus, fast is a 3-station lane. And, in another pandemic environment, maybe there's no one else in your lane, right? And it's just you. And again, doesn't necessarily really solve airborne any different than having great HVAC and having all the things that everybody else can do. But if we're all as an industry not thinking about how does a consumer feel, how's my member feel when he walks into this environment, I think we miss the point. I think that gets into class sizes. I think it gets into studio layout. I think it gets into your thesis on training and sharing equipment and all of that sort of stuff. And so we've had the fortune, frankly, again, it goes back to feeling like we got punched in the face, and then you go, oh, shit, this was probably like a really good thing for us to have to think about things that we all intellectually knew 3 years ago. It's not like it never crossed your mind, but you're like, well, every studio we've done has also worked, so it's probably going to be okay. Yeah. That's you don't get to have that mindset anymore. So we've thought a ton about that, in addition to kind of some of the other stuff I mentioned at the start around just it feeling different, it looking different and feeling different when I walk in. And then obviously the other element of that for us is, hey, worst case, a partner, a licensee, a franchise partner, and a member knowing that, hey, if worst case scenario happens, I still have this amazing at-home offering that I can offer and keep my members engaged, or as a member, keep feeling like there's always going to be something there for me, and keep me in the community and keep me training. And so all of those pieces, we've had to dig in. We always were on our mind, but we've had the opportunity and frankly the need to really dig in and think through reality, right? It's easy to develop slides. It's easy to tell a story. It's another thing to go, okay, what's the member actually do if this happens again?
And has the fact that you've got these other, in-home, in-club model, has that allowed you to change? Because I guess if you've got just a studio and there's a certain amount of space and it's in a certain location, then there's a certain number of people that you're going to need to kind of squash in there to make it work. Have you guys been able to change that model because of the other income streams, or is that still an important part of making the numbers work at the end of the day?
It's always going to be an important part of making the numbers work. So if you look at XPT on kind of this so XPT Studio, two different versions. One is a recovery studio, so it gets more to kind of that contrast therapy and breath work and that sort of stuff that we're super excited about, and I think it's really needed today. The other is really semi-private, and so it's a very different version of a boutique studio. It's not going to be 30 people in a class. It's going to be like 9 people in there at any given time with a few coaches. and where you have a personalized program, and then you have a few coaches in there to make sure that if you have questions or you need to change something or you need some guidance, that there's somebody really there for you. But it's a different, it's a very different model, and I think different market, different socioeconomic bucket, but I think a really powerful model, and certainly something that people will feel fine about in a pandemic, in another scenario like this. Other than that, and recovery is a little different. There's some other stuff that we're looking at that I won't get into today, but I'll say, we will be talking about, in the near future. That is a little bit of a tweak on some of the studio models, but for the most part, I think you still have to, know that your model will work in these areas where you have sufficient density to pull people into a physical environment. We have taken the approach to work with large territory partners, even domestically, which we get to do because we have Connor and Laird Gabby, and you have some of these partners who give you credibility off the bat versus having to do, 50 little mom and pop deals before you can do it. And that allows us, we partner with them on the whole portfolio. So they get rights to the entire portfolio for that territory, which solves some tricky things like reciprocal sharing between brands. We don't have that issue. It's all the same licensee in that territory, so you'll be able to easily walk into, multiple studio types, multiple brands within that territory. But because you have rights, because the partner has rights to the portfolio, they can really focus on bigger markets. You don't have to go saturate tertiary markets to meet your quota for the territory. You can really focus on building out in some of those key geographies and still hit your quota, because you can build, 5 fasts and 3 XPTs and 4 Ragnars and that sort of stuff in your major cities and still hit the number. So which is not to say secondary markets aren't important and interesting and all that sort of stuff, but I think we believe that the math has to work on getting people in a defined radius to show up at those studios.
One of the things I've been hearing about in some of the interviews is the shift from the cities like London, for example. I was talking to someone just the other week where people are not commuting into the cities as much. New York, I guess, is a similar situation, and they're kind of going out into the suburbs. Are you planning for sort of a slight change in location with what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think that's going to be territory by territory.
Yeah.
And so we certainly support our partners in kind of, hey, how do we think, how do we collectively think about the reality, right? Because we have to be where the people are, not where they used to be, not where they were supposed to be, but they aren't anymore. And so you certainly have to have a thesis of where are they actually. Is that going to be true 5 years from now or 10 years from now, right? Or was this a thing where you think they went back here for a couple of years, but they're going to come back here in a couple of years? If so, how do you hedge that? Are you building in both territories? So I think it's going to be different in different territories. I would say that my own personal perspective, for what it's worth, and Mike certainly would have a more informed perspective on this, I think some of these things are systemic. I think we've been deep enough in this reality for long enough that anyone who just thinks it's all going back to the same thing is, I would argue, probably not correct. That said, I think we also had a ton of people tell us over the last 2 years that out-of-home was over, which we thought was nonsensical, and I think clearly with the data we're seeing now was nonsensical. But the reality of has the role of it changed is, I think, similar to the reality of hey, has location changed, right? Do I think everyone is going to be back in an office? No. Do I think more people are than say they are in a survey response today? Yeah. I think more people will be back in the office at least multiple days per week, probably full time, than would say they are going to be today. So I think you have to. That's the reality of retail going forward, is how do you think about where people really are going to be? Again, our model gives us a little leniency on that with the connectivity into your house. But but you got to have a perspective on in your market, in your location, is this where people are?
So a couple of questions then about the future. Do you see some of the Pelotons of the world kind of going from, although they did start with actually a bricks and mortar studio, and then that was there. I went to that in New York. But do you see more of these digital type of companies doing the reverse? Like you said, they've got this technology that a lot of clubs don't have, and then starting to open these kind of locations. Do you see that as being, or if not, what do you see the future of the traditional fitness bricks and mortar location?
Yeah, I think so. Like, if I had to bet on it, I think so. I mean, look, I think fitness studios are the best version I can think of experiential retail, which is what every leading brand would tell you they want their stores to be, right? And so Nike included, and Nike runs some amazing stores. When you walk into a boutique fitness studio, if I want to sell you fitness equipment, what better possible way could there be than for me to have this amazing class with this incredible coach and lighting and music and awesome people sweating next to you? Like, if I want to convert you on a piece of equipment, like, that's the best thing I could ever do. And, you're going to pay me for it too? Like, that's okay. So yes, my short version would be, I think, again, it is a very different skill set. It's, for a lot of them, there's going to be, there's going to be a reluctance to license or franchise. And so that takes you into company-owned stores, which is a very different capital intensity. So I think there's a lot of decision making and how, and then hiring and all of that sort of stuff to figure out. But look, I don't want to give them the pitch on why they should do it, so I'm not going to do that. But I obviously, as you can tell from our thesis, people want to engage with your brand. Yeah. Probably in any industry, certainly in fitness. You should probably let them.
Yeah. So what's for you guys then? Where are you hoping to be in 5 years with, assuming that there's nothing crazy going on in the world, which I guess it's probably a weird statement to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, we think there's a huge opportunity right now. So, we feel like we've spent the last 3 years getting that foundation in place, right? We're, going back to that flywheel of having the ability to serve all of them through, owned or partnered, but most of them through owned. And because of that, we feel really fortunate right now, right? So it's as you know, a super interesting time in the industry because you have out of home coming back. And certainly if you look at utilization or you look at any of the data, super encouraging, right? Back above 2019 levels for the most part. Some squishiness in certain aspects of boutique, but overall from an industry standpoint, back above 2019 utilization. That's a little funky because some of the stuff is gone, right? So, but that's the data. But we're all still, I think a lot of people, both members and operators, are still like, yeah, what's next, right? Like, what happens? Is it really ready? Is it real? And I think even landlords are like, eh. And so, huge, like, to us, that uncertainty is opportunity, right? And same thing for at home, where you have, again, as we started with, I think anyone who argues adoption hasn't improved over the last 2 years, willingness to pay hasn't improved over the last two, like, it just has. It's not a thesis, it's fact at this point. And again, I get it. Some people have had some pretty difficult stock price adjustments. Like, that's valuation and finance. That's not consumer interest. Right. And even Peloton takes a lot of grief. And I think their monthly engagement went down from like 24 to 16 classes a month or something like that. Huh. You tell any fitness
and that's
operator,
probably fairly accurate because they do actually know, assuming they're producing accurate results, you probably can't get that level of information from a lot of...
Yeah, and look, that includes a 5-minute warm-up and all that sort of stuff, but look, that's great engagement, right? So we and we see it in our stuff too, and so I think we know that space is more advanced than it was 2 years ago from a consumer adoption standpoint and price point. Also just from a quality standpoint, right? Like, the quality of stuff that we're putting out in that space now, when you look at content and even on the tech side, is just way better than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So, pillar A, pillar B, I guess, and then we obviously have this sell-through of other stuff, and obviously the event side on the front end too. That rev mix for us is a really nice natural hedge against what happens if this, another strain or a new thing comes up. We have these other two to three aspects that actually do better.
Do your franchisees, say for example, I'm in England and I want to take it on, would I also get like the retail parts? Does that come along with it that you sell online, or is that separate? Are they just operating clubs in those markets?
So we will definitely have to incent them to integrate the at-home stuff, right? Like that should come. That there should be, I'll say a platinum version of your membership that comes with at home, and they should get a piece of that.
Yeah.
And that should help buffer them in situations where, really bad stuff happens again. Not going to make it right, but it's going to be better than they were in with somebody else, and better than they were in, this last time around. We want that, right? Yeah. Like for us, our whole, so I guess let me go back to the first question. So we actually think in terms of where do you want to be in the 5 years, like we think there's a huge opportunity right now because our model gives us this safety, this diversification in a world where I think there's a lot of operators still kind of just going like, I just want to get through the next, like I kind of coming out of the last 2 years, but I'm not sure. And I just want to get through the next year or two. Like we feel like this is our time because we have the foundation in place, because we've done the work on the technology, on the studio, like we've done the work on each of the individual pieces, and our model gives us the benefit of having some safety should something else happen, right? Like we don't have this binary risk of like studios go away and I'm screwed. So where do we feel like time to hit the gas, and we want to be, I don't think this is an industry where any one of these buckets, let alone all of them, is going to have a winner. Like I just don't think that's a thing in our industry. But I do think it's really important to be in that lead group. Yeah. And we want to be in that lead group in the next 2 years. And so that's a huge goal for us. Yeah. Right. Like we want to be aggressive and we want to be in that lead group in the next couple of years. The second part of that question was on it was on the licenses. So
yeah, it was just really, I suppose, I could see the excitement of, well, I'm not just relying on the people that come in the doors, there's other things, and I was just wondering if that is something that they are part of if you take on a market.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is, like we've always believed in fair and reasonable deals across everything. Like if you're not setting that, if I'm trying to win the deal with my licensee partner in a territory, like that tax just gets passed on to a member, right? Like they're not going to be excited about that. Then I have a licensee partner who's not excited about the at-home technology or doesn't want programming to lead into an event because they're going to be nervous that the at-home is actually going to take away from them, or they're going to lose somebody to the event, or that event's going to lead them to a different thing. Like that doesn't help. Ultimately, that doesn't help me, right? Like I succeed when my member succeeds because she stays with us longer, engages more deeply at each of the brands, eventually crosses over to a different brand. And if I want my member to succeed so that I can succeed, then my partner has to succeed. I can't be telling him to stay in his box, but give me that member over here. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting model that I'm sure there's some out there, but like you say, it's very different to a lot of the fitness businesses that are out there at the moment, and I guess it's sort of I guess it's like reshaping where things will go. But do you think do you think the fact that technology is as it is now compared to when Mike was with Mark Mastroff, in the 24-hour fitness stage, do you think a lot of what you're able to do is because the technology capabilities that are around are here today and that wasn't possible years ago?
100%. I also I think it's a bunch of things. I think the consumer's changed. I think they want different things. Like ultimately, technology wouldn't change. If anything, like the Nike Plus puck, all we wanted you to do was take out an insole, put a puck in. It's like 2.5 minutes of your time, tops, probably like 30 seconds. That's hard. Getting a consumer to do that is hard. So if the consumer didn't change and their desires didn't change and their view of fitness didn't change to be more expansive and to want more community and to want, like, the technology wouldn't matter. And that's frankly been a problem historically in the industry, is we'll give consumers like, here's a cool thing I can do with technology, you should buy it. And they're like, I don't fucking care. That's not what I need. Like that, right? That's not servicing what I need. So one, I think the consumer changed. And that was really the founding thesis of Mike and me for FitLab, was just like, this is a consumer that is disrupting an incredible market, right? There's never been, like, fitness has always been a great market. It's just getting better and better and simultaneously being changed, right? Because a consumer has different expectations about what they want in the industry. And then, yes, it's one thing, again, historically, to be able to say, hey, I have a portfolio of all this different stuff, you should buy it, versus it's all integrated into one offering, right? And partake of whatever pieces you want on any given day or any given time, but you don't have to go figure it out yourself. You're just saying yes to, I want the supplement solution as part of my McGregor fast training, right? Or, sure, I love this content, send me the equipment for at home too, because I love doing it in the studios, but I only want to go to the studios a couple times a week. So give me this stuff at home too. I'm going to train at home and in the studio. And then, you're not going to do 15 events a year. Probably some will. But like, you know what? I don't have a lot of motivation today. Like right now, I need to sign up for this event so that I have a reason to go train. And then you may not do one the next year, right? But then you may hit another spot again where you want to check one out. And so you can't do all of that. You could, but it would be much more fragmented and siloed, the way that the industry always started out. If it was just like, hey, I'm going to put a sign up in the gym telling you that there's an event you should go sign up for, right? Like that's a different thing than like, oh yeah, I'm going to register for this. Here's my training plan, and the studio's programming this month is actually geared towards the event. It's just a different thing.
And he must have, I guess the pandemic and people like Peloton must have changed also what the consumer sees as what would be natural for their fitness. Because I suppose prior to that, the clubs was the natural place you generally did it, wasn't it? And I guess now it's like, doing it in front of a screen or a phone is what everybody does, isn't it? I think it's certainly a lot of people I speak to, their perception of what doing fitness is different.
I think any time, there's kind of, it's like, what's your perception of when things go from temporary to structural change? Right, and I think we were all trending this way anyway, right? Pre-COVID, just like every other industry. It's not. I don't think that it changed anything in the industry. It just kind of accelerated it. But I think you could see it before, right? So if you go to why were boutiques and digital fitness simultaneously growing at 35 to 45% CAGRs? They're both instructor-led fitness. They're either hyper-personalized, right? Hey, Brian, here's your program, specific from where you are to where you want to go, and it's going to change to get you there. That's basically just a personal trainer in your pocket, right? Or, with Peloton as a great example, awesome content. It's a class. What's the difference, if you're doing it in person or in your home? Well, look, in person, different feel, different immersiveness, people working next to you. Yeah, leaderboard is great, but for a lot of us, it hits different when it's truly people sweating next to me. But it's the same thing, largely. And I think now the answer, and again, our thesis at the start was people want all. It's not a question of, do I want a studio sometimes? Do I want at home sometimes? Do I want events sometimes? It's want all of those things. Yeah. I may change day to day, week to week, month to month, like how much support I need. For me right now, like I was never a class guy. And right now I need it. I'm tired of doing burpees in my garage. I don't have a ton of motivation, and when I walk into a class, I don't have to figure out my workout. I don't have to convince myself every rep to go harder because there's just all these awesome people working hard next to me. I just shut my brain off, I go to the class, I do what somebody's yelling at me to do, and that's it. And I'm going to go compete with all these folks next to me. That's what I need right now. A month from now, I probably won't. I'll probably be back at home, and I'm okay, and I don't need it now. And I think our solution is built for that. I don't have to go find one thing that I like and then figure out how to change a month later and cancel that and do this. And like, I just don't think that's not what people expect or want anymore. But I think you're right. I think because we were stuck doing it in front of our screens, it feels more normal today. And I think that's structural. I think that's structural after 2 years.
So final question then. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you believed was impossible and gone to make it possible. From a FitLab's business perspective, as a leader of this business, what would you say is an example of where you've had to, over the last 2 or 3 years, had to escape your own personal limits in terms of what you thought was actually possible for you to achieve?
Yeah. So this one for me, I will probably say is speed. It's not the perfect word, but so my partner Mike Melby, again, came out of it a bit more from a four-wall fitness perspective, but fundamentally believes we can do everything in the industry at the same time immediately. I come at it much more from like maybe we could, but it's all hard, and let's make sure that we get it right, and let's be thoughtful and pragmatic and all of that sort of stuff. And I think that balance really has shaped our business. And it's not without tension, right? Like those are very different. Like we fundamentally believe the same thing, want to go to the same place, believe the same drivers, all of that sort of stuff. But I would probably get there 50% slower. I would probably have fewer errors and spikes, and Mike would get there, but it would be messy, and maybe some stuff went bad along the way. But I think together we have this balance where we're going to get there a lot faster. I think we're going to get there a lot cleaner. But I do think that, I would have, I certainly wouldn't say we would grow the way we have during COVID in a time when, again, we went into it thinking we're going to lead with studios, and studios went away, and we still drove massive growth in the business during those 2 years. And I wouldn't have given you the answer 5 years ago that I did when you said, where do you want to be 5 years from now? My answer was basically, I want to be there in 2. And I think we can. And I think, part of that is we have a build-buy strategy where we get to be a little more flexible in terms of how we think about growth. Still critical to integrate it. Only works if we get in one platform, one org, all of that sort of stuff. But I think we fundamentally believe that there's going to be huge opportunities for us to be acquisitive in the next couple of years. But I also know that with the team that we've built and recruited and the infrastructure that we have in place, we're ready to go. And so I guess I would say, I think I wouldn't have said that I think we can be in the industry, lead pack in 2 years, probably, at any time. And that's what I've really learned is hey, it takes an incredible team, takes a big vision, takes a lot, it's not without pain. But you can move mountains a lot faster than you think.
Mm. Sounds like you've got the perfect dynamic, really, isn't it? If you had two of one of each of you, it could be...
it could get a little bit... I would be way too slow, and, I won't say what Mike would be, but I really do think so. I think having partners is actually super powerful. I think particularly in times like this, man, going through COVID, I have some friends who run, our CEOs of businesses, and going through COVID, on an island by yourself. I think it was bad enough with two of us, with us and an amazing team. It would have been just brutal alone. So I'm super thankful for that. I think if you can, so I think it can probably be really bad if you pick the wrong one. If you get the right one, it can be pretty incredible.
Well, it's an exciting journey. I'm looking forward to coming back when you've got some of these studios open and seeing how you're getting on. But I can't wait to see it in real life.
You and me both.
Yeah, I bet. Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.